Hi, my name is Addison Goodrich, and I'm going to be talking about my experience on my grandparents' dairy farm. Brook Farm was originally called Brook Farms because there are multiple farms in the area. The farm is on Mac Mountain Road. You can see it from Route 2. I live right up the road from it, so I can go down whenever I want. I have lived here for 14 years. The farm is red and has silos around it, and a house that my great-grandparents lived in and my great-grandfather was born in and died in the same room. There are all kinds of different sounds. Usually the cows are out in the pasture during the summer grazing. When it gets too hot, they will clump up, and that is how we know they need to come into the barn. I don't go to the farm every day, but on the weekends, I have been milking cows in the evening, and that usually takes 2 hours to get everything all done. There are 12 stalls that the cows go into. Once they are locked up, we dip them with a peroxide solution that helps clean their teats. Then we use our hands to strip milk from the cow. After we are all done with that, we grab a towel to wipe off the manure and dip from their teats. And after that, we put the milk around. Some of my favorite things about the farm is driving the skid steer to bed the cows. When we bed the cows, we use the skid steer to get sawdust and bring it to the barns where some of the cows are kept. I also really enjoy mowing all the lawns around the farm. The farm has been around for a long time. I'm the 9th generation on my family's farm. When I was a little girl, I was in the barn hanging out with my mom and grandparents while they milked cows. I don't think I'd want to take over the farm because I think it's hard to do other things in life when you're stuck at the farm. Even though I don't want to own the farm, I would still love the farm to be there and all the land to be taken care of. I hope whoever takes over the farm someday will still let me ride my dirt bike and hunt on the land. Hi, I'm here with my great-grandmother Sally Goodrich, who grew up on the farm and had 6 kids that were all boys. What was it like when you were younger on the farm?
Always down there chatting away with Harry John Carroll, who lived up the road, the first place up the road before you get next farm, so about a mile up the Mac Mountain Road. And so I snapped the whip and I went down the hill and across the bridge. And I guess I was swinging it most of the way, and they were beginning to scatter. However, I guess Harry John was a little heavy and he was a little slow, and I guess maybe that Wynn said I hit Harry John. Well, I don't remember that I did, but maybe it could have. I was swinging it at the kids some. Now, 4 of them went up the hill, but around by the end, up towards the barn. One of them, Jim, decided to walk just ahead of me. And I said, now this whip's going to be cracking all the time. I'm going to be behind you. If you can walk faster than your old mother can, then you won't get hit. If you don't, you may. So yeah, that's what I did. I wish I had said that, because now I've got to use it. And Jim tried. So he got some marks on his bare legs, and he went to gym class the next day, and the gym teacher, who was he? Oh, golly, I know, but I can't think what that name was. And he said, what's that on your legs? Oh, my mother hit me with the whip. Not that I deserved it. But anyway, the others escaped, and they were laughing on the side. But Jim had a few marks on him, which went and said later, if it was today, Mother, he said, you would have got put in jail if you hit a kid with a whip. I said, really? Even if they deserved it? So anyway, well, it was interesting. One time, Myles, I went to a sale in Rutland because we had heifer selling down there. And Walt didn't go because he thought he had, it was late May, so he thought he had a lot of spring work to do or haying to start. So he didn't go, and the kids stayed with him. He didn't keep very good track of them, and they got up playing in the haymow. And all of a sudden, Myles kind of made a mistake and got in the chute that goes down into the cow barn. At that time, the cows were hitched up. They weren't there. They were out in the pasture. But anyway, he came down the hay chute, and they said he landed on his head. Now, the hay chute was up quite a ways above the floor, so they called Doc Caffin, who came over and checked him out, but he thought he was all right. But you can't land on your head and be all right, really. I think it has affected him somewhat, because he's been a little bit slow. And so, yeah, that's one of the downsides of it. But the upside was that it was very, very interesting, and I think the kids enjoyed it. They had a pond at the time out in the pasture. When you first go out and down the grade and when it levels out, there was, you don't remember that, Christy?
No, it wasn't there when I was a kid.
Well, anyway, there was a pond that Walt dug up, and it was not terrible deep, but it was over Glenn's head, and the head Glenn went and did a lot of things that were not kosher, but they were out on the pond and they had Glenn in on the raft, and they decided to knock him off the raft and see if he could swim to shore. Well, of course he couldn't, but it was over his head, so what was he going to do? He got his feet on the bottom and he started walking under the water, and pretty soon he's up above, and so he walked to the shore, and they were, well, they would have been in deep trouble.
What was it like when you were younger on the farm?
There's a picture of my mother over there. She died when she was 24. She had a brain condition that caused her to have these convulsions or something. And so she never could go to St. J Academy because of it. And she did die when she was 24 and I was 4. So Grandpa and Grandma, at the time we lived in Newport, and Grandpa and Grandma came right up, and I lived with them, with my brother Dale, ever since, until I got married, and I was not quite 20. I was the end of September of 1950, September 29th of 1950. And I married Walt Goodrich, and we met on a blind date. And if you have a chance to go on a blind date in the daytime, Crystal Lake swimming, you can't go swimming because I had this horrible rash that I picked up in Toronto, Canada at an International Rainbow Girls Convention. And that was in June. And when I came home from there, I had 3 bites on my belly right here. Looked like mosquito bites. Probably they were bed bugs. This was the best hotel in Toronto. But that's what happens. In really good hotels, they do get bed bugs because that's where the international people come to the best hotels, and they quite often bring, from Europe, they bring bed bugs. Mm-hmm. And back in those days, it probably wasn't quite so well screened as it is now. But anyway, I had those 3 bites, and I started lying out in the sun to get my tan, because I was behind times, having been up there. And so I wasn't tan. So I was out there getting tan, and all of a sudden those bites began to erupt into big sores that itched and were very uncomfortable. And Grandma said after a while, we did everything we knew. And she sent me down to Dr. Paulson, who had a camp next door to Grandpa Farr's. And he said, oh, put some milk and magnesium and baking soda on that and he'll probably clear it up. Didn't do a darn thing. And so Grandma said after 2 or 3 days, she said, you're going out to Dr. Farmer in St. Johnsbury. So I went out there, and the first thing he told me, I know exactly what it is, and you may have this every spring and every fall. I said, no, I can't take it. It was all over my back, all over the front of me. It was just, and it itched and burned, and it was horrible. So he gave me a prescription, 2 things to put on it, and Grandma would put the stuff on my back, and whoo, she could have put a flame torch on me, and it felt the same way. I couldn't do the front until that back got burned out a little. So anyway, but that began to help. So when I met Walt, it was 2 friends of mine that said, we'd like to go to Crystal Lake swimming, but Miles Wakefield's truck isn't good enough to take us. It ball tires and out of gas and all kinds of things. Let's call Walt Goodrich. And so they called him. Well, I said, no, I'm not going to any unplanned date. But they talked me into it after about an hour. So Walt came over. Yeah, he'd go. So he came over and got us. And we went up to Crystal Lake. I didn't get into a bathing suit because I wasn't fit to be in a bathing suit. But so that was my first knowledge of Walt Goodrich. He was very, very nice, very considerate, and very good looking. There's his picture up there behind. Now, I don't know why that Jennifer and Chris are in. There they are, right up front. Are in the wooden things. But I think Whitten took most of my pictures and put them in wood frames. There's Walt when he graduated from VR. Oh, I know, he held my hand to say goodbye. He could see this kind of rash on my neck, so and he knew I didn't go swimming. So he was a little bit suspicious, maybe. I mean, I could have. So anyway, that was our first meeting, and when he held my hand, whoa, whoa, there was electricity. Of course, I didn't expect he had electricity, but later on he did tell me that first, that handhold did it, because he knew then he was going to keep dating me. And so, are you getting any of this, Addie?
Yes.
Oh, is it all right that I talk so much?
Yeah.
So I'll go and get on with this. Anyway, 2 nights later, he came over to Grandpa's, and Grandma said, she's down to Pat's, 4 camps down. And so he came into the yard, and Pat and I were up in her bedroom. And his car drove in, and all of a sudden this gentleman got out of the car, and he said in his way, Walt always had kind of a deep drawl voice, and he said, is Sally here? I said, Pat, it's Walt. He's come after us. So he wanted to know if we wanted to go out to St. Jane and pick up Myles Whitefield. That was his name. That was Pat's guy. And he ran an excavator. And so he was out there doing some work that he was getting paid for. So anyway, I said, come on, Pat. Down the stairs we went, out in the yard. Yes, we said, we would love to go out to St. John Bury. So that was our first date. It was magnetic. Now you're 13, Addie, huh?
14.
You are 14.
Mm-hmm. What was your favorite time of year on the farm and why?
Well, that's hard to say, because every season has its good points and bad points. Our house that big house is almost 200 years old, 1838. So that kind of makes it almost 200 years old. And Walt did put in some insulation one time, but that was back before they knew about asbestos. And he put in asbestos insulation. Thought that would be great. It was until Capstone came along to blow in some good ventilation, good insulation into that house. And they found out by testing that it had what'd I say?
Asbestos.
Yeah, asbestos in there. Now you see, an easy thing like that, and I missed it. But, yeah, so they couldn't do it. So then Walt had to put in backs or something or other. So it helps quite a bit.
Why did you choose to farm?
I'll tell you, Patty, I always wanted to live on a farm. From the time I was little, right up through. All my grade school years, my high school years. Grandpa Farm was a banker. And he was, at first it was treasurer of the Citizen Savings Bank on the corner of Railroad Street and Eastern Avenue in St. Johnsbury. And when he was 72, I guess, he was then president. And he would go around to these farms that the bank had on mortgages and see how they were doing. And of course, I had to get out of the car and get in the barns. Oh yeah, that was my thing. Boy, did I ever want to get into a barn. So when I'd get out and I'd come back to the car, I'd run back and I'd jump in the back seat, and Grandma always wore a hat, and I'd hit that hat, didn't mean to, but I would, and it'd go down over her nose. I'd say, Grandma, don't I smell good? Back then the barns weren't ventilated like they are now, and there wasn't such a thing as a freestyle barn. And so it was, it could have some aroma to it. And I was just as interested in their workhorses as I was in their cows and heifers, and probably a little bit more. I always wanted to have a horse, but I never got one until after I married Walt. And I didn't get one then right away, but Walt's father was so that's why when I met Walt and I went over to the farm, and then I graduated from St. J Academy in '49, so it's been 75 years, and I didn't go to the 75th reunion. I didn't see any point in it. Joyce, McAllister, Dumas, and I are the only graduates 75 years ago that are still alive, that we know of. I don't, I can't keep track of people. That's why I chose to farm. Met a wonderful, handsome guy that farmed. And, I would have fallen for him whether he farmed or not, but it was just very, very nice that he did. And after I'd been married for a few years, his father was interested in horses. And Walt had to ride horseback over to Cabot High School this first year because he was only 15, and he didn't have a driver's license. Even though he drove, he didn't have a license. So he drove for Warren Stevenson, who lived down Route 2 towards West Danville, about a mile from us. And Warren would have him drive his car. For some reason or other, he couldn't drive it, whether he got into trouble or something, but something happened that he couldn't drive, but he had a license, so he was let Walt drive. But that first year, he had a horse called Champ, and they got it down to Lesnick's. Coming up from Marshfield, going towards West Danville, going east. That farm that's just up Marshfield Dam Hill at the top, and then it's on to the left. It used to be Lesnick's farm, and they brought horses in from the west, work horses and different things like that. Well, Champ was one of these horses, but he was a riding horse, and he'd been trained Western. So the minute your foot hit the stirrup, he was on his hind legs, and he gave whoom, 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 6 big hops like that. And then when his front feet hit the ground, he was in full gallop. Now, how Walt, who didn't know anything about riding, I'm sure he didn't, because he might have been on a horse, but he didn't know. And by golly, he never got thrown off. Never got thrown off, except, well, there was one time. The Champ was coming, he would put him in a barn that Will and whatever his wife's name was, Addie. No, it wasn't Addie. Something like Addie. Barb lived across the road from the school. And so he would put his horse, Champ, into that barn for the day, put a blanket on him, and put him in there. Well, Champ was ready to go when he got out of high school, when he got out of the school and was headed for home. So Champ got on, and Champ was in full gallop across the school ground. But he got stuck in the snow, and he kind of went on his nose and all went over his head. But guess what? Walt was able to get back on his back before Champ got to his feet and started running. Yeah, can you imagine that? Oh, so anyway,
He probably would have had
he
a
was
walk
in
home.
full gallop the whole time, going up to Danville Hill Road, you know, and on across, and the road wasn't like it is now. No, it wasn't like that when Walt and I were married until just lately. Yeah, no, it was pretty rough, but, and it went a little different way. Instead of coming out on Route 2 like that, it went over this way, more to the left and across the brook. And one time, Champ in full gallop, and he went of course, that way, because that's where the road went. And he broke through the bridge at the brook and boop, and went on his nose and broke his bit. But he was on his feet right off, and boom! And Walt never got thrown off, except on the school ground.
Here I'm going to be talking to my grandmother, Rhonda Goodrich, about her experiences on the farm. What's your favorite thing about the farm and why?
Well, I'm here with my granddaughter, Addison May Goodrich, and one of my favorite things about the farm is being able to work with family. My grandchildren are the 9th generation. I work with my husband, who's the 7th generation. I love the cows. We have registered jerseys that have been here since 1914. They are so much fun to work with. The land is beautiful. I get to be outside. I get to see the stars, especially this time of year with the time change coming up in the morning, and I get to see beautiful sunsets. I get to see the animals doing all kinds of fun things. I think it's a real important way of life. It's hard, but I just love it.
Why did you decide to be Stonyfield Organic?
Well, first we decided to be organic because we're thinking about the climate, we're thinking about sustainability, and we're thinking about the land for future generations. And one of the biggest parts is that we do not want to have herbicides and pesticides on our land. We also want to raise our animals where they're not pushed as hard, where they can be a little more natural. They love grazing. They are healthier. They're just fun to be with. I think Stonyfield, we chose Stonyfield because we like what they stand for. They want really high quality farms, and they really support small dairy farms like ours, where we have about 2 acres per cow, which really makes us more climate friendly.
Do you know when the farm was originally built and who owned it back then?
The farm was originally built around 1835, and the first family members that farmed down here, they had settled up on Cow Hill, but it was too cold up there. The elevation is probably 1,600 feet. So they settled down here where the farm is now located, and it was originally homesteaded by Amos Abbott and Betsy Knight Abbott.
Where's the farm located and how long has it been here?
The farm is located in Cabot, Vermont, on 39 Cow Hill Road. And the farm has been here almost 200 years. In 2035, we'll be 200 years old.
What is it like going from an office job to working on a dairy farm?
Well, I worked in Montpelier for over 20 years and drove back and forth to work. And I was a senior paralegal at National Life Group, and I managed a staff of 6. And it was a lot of responsibility, and I really did enjoy that job. But for me, I much prefer working on the dairy farm. I get to work with family, like my granddaughter, Addison Goodrich. I get to work with my husband and my children. I'm finding that I am capable of so much more than I ever thought I could do. I think being on the dairy farm, I think it's been really rewarding, and it's a change that I'm so glad that I made.
What are some different pieces of family history that you think is important?
I think one of the biggest pieces of history that I think is important about Molly Brook Farm is that the family has managed to stay here for almost 200 years. I think that is so important. I think that they have always done the right thing, given to the community, been good citizens, and just have a really good reputation. I think that's really important too. I think that some of the parts of the family history that are really neat for me as a woman are, for instance, Inez Goodrich, who is she is a 5th generation farmer, and it was her family farm her father's farm that she married, and it became Goodrich. The name became Goodrich. But what I think is so neat about her is how hard she worked, how busy she was, how she made her own clothes, how she still went out to the barn, how she did sugaring, how she hitched up a team of horses and did work in the field. I just think that's really neat. I think women are really played a big role in agricultural history here in Vermont.
How was farming different back then compared to today?
Well, one of the really nice pieces that we have of never leaving the farm is that we've got a lot of journals. And one of the things that I noticed that they did back then, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, they did a lot of trading, like trading a pig for, or a few pigs for a cow, and there was a lot of trading. The labor was much more manual back then, by hand, and then it moved to like haying with horses and oxen, and now of course we have tractors, which make it much more efficient. Back then, when the farm started out, there were about 12 cows. There has been as many as 120 cows. Organically, right now, we have about 75 cows. But, the numbers and the amount of work certainly has changed. I think one of the things, another thing even now, we used to be in a tie stall where the cows were tied up and you went from cow to cow. Now we milk in a step-up milking parlor, but there are farmers now that are even milking with computers, with robots. So that certainly has changed a lot. One of the things that hasn't changed, though, that always makes me feel connected to the past is that cows still get milk fever. Cows still have babies. They still need special attention, and that hasn't changed so much over the last 200 years. And I think that's a nice part because it kind of keeps you connected. And also the family ties and the big family meals, that's still consistent, which again keeps us all connected through the different generations.
I'm talking with my grandfather, Myles Goodrich, who is the 7th generation on Molly Brook Farm. What are some of your favorite things about the farm?
Yeah, like I said, we used to like to hunt, deer hunting, rabbit hunted some, partridge, but it was nice going out as a family. Everybody would go in a different area, but we'd kind of all start together. And working together was pretty good, putting up square bales in the summer. It wasn't fun, but it was nice to do it all together. We had motorcycles that we all rode, and snowmobiles in the wintertime, and we all skied. That's not part of the farm. Well, it kind of is part of the farm. We used to ski on the hills around here. Trying to think what else. Meals were always good.
Do you have any funny stories about growing up with your siblings?
It's hard to remember anything in particular. You know, there was one time we were loading hay on the hay wagon, taking off the back of the baler and stack them on the trailer. And one of the boards broke on the front of the trailer, and it dumped me off in front of the tire, and the wagon ran over me. That wasn't funny, but kind of something different. But they backed the wagon off and started over again. Let's see. Funny stories. Yeah. Parents were going to town meeting that day. We put bread bags on our feet, barefoot, and ran as far as we could up through the snow. It was, early March. We went as far as we could, then my parents came back because they forgot something in the house, so they came back and we're standing out there freezing because we didn't want them to see us. So they took their time, but they finally got back in the car and took off, so we ran back to the house with the bread bags on our feet because they were really going to protect us. But that's a good one, Ron. Yeah, that's.
What kind of jobs did you do when you were younger?
Mostly cleaning behind the calves with a wheelbarrow and shovel. Used to have to go up in the hay mow and throw hay bales down to feed everybody because the milking cows got square bales also. We had some silage back then when I was young, but that was just shoveled into a wheelbarrow and fed to the cows individually. And then we got one upright silo, which we put corn silage in. That helped speed things up a lot. Still fed square bales. There was a lot of hay upstairs that we had to play in, make tunnels. Spent a lot of time in the hay mow.
What equipment did you use back then?
The earliest one was a sickle bar mower that was in the middle of the tractor. It just, I'm trying to think how to explain it, but there really wasn't much to it. Just knives that went back and forth like this that cut the grass to hay. And then we had a tedder. We had to dry all the hay because it was small square bales then. So that was pretty slow, but it was better than what was before that. And the manure spreader was one that just beater spreader that spreaded the manure out the back. I think what else? Wasn't a whole lot of equipment actually then. A lot of it was by hand. There was a hay conveyor that we unloaded the hay onto that took the hay from the wagon outside the barn to the back of the barn. Yeah, that's about all the equipment I can remember.
Thank you to my family members who let me interview them.